Chapter 2, Part 1 of The Water Babies. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Corey Samuel. The Water Babies by Charles Kingsley. Chapter 2, Part 1. And is there care in heaven? And is there love in heavenly spirits to these creatures base, that may compassion of their evils move? There is, else much more wretched were the case of men than beasts. But oh, the exceeding grace of highest God, that loves his creatures so, and all his works with mercy doth embrace, that blessed angels he sends to and fro, to serve to wicked man, to serve his wicked foe. Spenser. A mile off, and 1,000 feet down. So Tom found it, though it seemed as if he could have chucked a pebble onto the back of the woman in the red petticoat who was weeding in the garden, or even across the dale to the rocks beyond. For the bottom of the valley was just one field broad, and on the other side ran the stream, and above it grey crag, grey down, grey stair, grey moor, walled up to heaven. A quiet, silent, rich, happy place. A narrow crack cut deep into the earth, so deep and so out of the way that the bad bogies can hardly find it out. The name of the place is Vendale, and if you want to see it for yourself, you must go up into the High Craven, and search from Bolland Forest north by Ingleborough to the 9 Standards and Cross Fell, and if you have not found it, you must turn south and search the Lake Mountains, down to Scorefell and the sea, and then, if you have not found it, you must go northward again by Merry Carlisle, and search the Cheviots all across, from Annan Water to Berwick Law, and then, whether you have found Vendale or not, you will have found such a country and such a people as ought to make you proud of being a British boy. So Tom went to go down, and at first he went down 300 feet of steep heather, mixed up with loose browned grindstone, as rough as a file, which was not pleasant to his poor little heels, as he came bump, stump, jump, down the steep, and still he thought he could throw a stone into the garden. Then he went down 300 feet of limestone terraces, one below the other, as straight as if a carpenter had ruled them with his ruler, and then cut them out with his chisel. There was no heath there, but, first, a little grass slope, covered with the prettiest flowers, rock rose and saxifrage, and thyme and basil, and all sorts of sweet herbs. Then bump down a 2-foot step of limestone, then another bit of grass and flowers, then bump down a 1-foot step, then another bit of grass and flowers for 50 yards, as steep as the house roof, where he had to slide down on his dear little tail. Then another step of stone, 10 feet high, and there he had to stop himself, and crawl along the edge to find a crack, for if he had rolled over, he would have rolled right into the old woman's garden, and frightened her out of her wits. Then, when he had found a dark narrow crack, full of green-stalked fern, such as hangs in the basket in the drawing-room, and had crawled down through it, with knees and elbows as he would down a chimney, there was another grass slope, and another step, and so on till, oh dear me, I wish it was all over, and so did he. And yet he thought he could throw a stone into the old woman's garden. At last he came to a bank of beautiful shrubs, white beam with its great silver-backed leaves, and mountain ash and oak, and below them cliff and crag, with great beds of crown ferns and wood sedge, while through the shrubs he could see the stream sparkling, and hear it murmur on the white pebbles. He did not know that it was 300 feet below. You would have been giddy, perhaps, at looking down, but Tom was not. He was a brave little chimney-sweep, and when he found himself on the top of a high cliff, instead of sitting down and crying for his bubba, though he never had had any bubba to cry for, he said, "Ah, this will just suit me," though he was very tired. and down he went by stock and stone, sedge and ledge, bush and rush, as if he had been born a jolly little black ape, with 4 hands instead of 2. And all the while he never saw the Irishwoman coming down behind him. But he was getting terribly tired now. The burning sun on the fells had sucked him up, but the damp heat of the woody crag sucked him up still more, and the perspiration ran out of the ends of his fingers and toes, and washed him cleaner than he had been for a whole year. But, of course, he dirtied everything terribly as he went. There has been a great black smudge all down the crag ever since, and there have been more black beetles in Vendale since than were ever known before, all, of course, owing to Tom's having blacked the original papa of them all, just as he was setting off to be married with a sky-blue coat and scarlet leggins, as smart as a gardener's dog with a polyanthus in his mouth. At last he got to the bottom. But behold, it was not the bottom, as people usually find when they are coming down a mountain. For at the foot of the crag were heaps and heaps of fallen limestone of every size, from that of your head to that of a stage waggon, with holes between them full of sweet heath fern. And before Tom got through them, he was out in the bright sunshine again, and then he felt, once for all and suddenly, as people generally do, that he was B-E-A-T, beat. You must expect to be beat a few times in your life, little man, if you live such a life as a man ought to live, let you be as strong and healthy as you may. And when you are, you will find it a very ugly feeling. I hope that that day you may have a stout, staunch friend by you who is not beat, for if you have not, you had best lie where you are, and wait for better times, as poor Tom did. He could not get on. The sun was burning, and yet he felt chill all over. He was quite empty, and yet he felt quite sick. There was but 200 yards of smooth pasture between him and the cottage, and yet he could not walk down it. He could hear the stream murmuring only 1 field beyond it, and yet it seemed to him as if it were 100 miles off. He lay down on the grass till the beetles ran over him, and the flies settled on his nose. I don't know when he would have got up again, if the gnats and the midges had not taken compassion on him, but the gnats blew their trumpets so loud in his ear, and the midges nibbled so at his hands and face, wherever they could find a place free from soot, that at last he woke up and stumbled away, down over a low wall, and into a narrow road, and up to the cottage door. And a neat pretty cottage it was, with clipped yew hedges all round the garden, and yews inside too, cut into peacocks and trumpets and teapots, and all sorts of queer shapes. And out of the open door came a noise like that of the frogs on the Great A, when they know it is going to be scorching hot to-morrow. And how they know that, I don't know, and you don't know, and nobody knows. And there sat by the empty fireplace, which was filled with a pot of sweet herbs, the nicest old woman that ever was seen, in her red petticoat and short dimity bedgown, and clean white cap with a black silk handkerchief over it, tied under her chin. At her feet sat the grandfather of all the cats, and opposite her sat, on 2 benches, 12 or 14 neat, rosy, chubby little children, learning their criss-cross row, and gabble enough they made about it. Such a pleasant cottage it was, with a shiny clean stone floor, and curious old prints on the walls, and an old black oak sideboard full of bright pewter and brass dishes, and a cuckoo clock in the corner, which began shouting as soon as Tom appeared. Not that it was frightened at Tom, but that it was just 11 o'clock. All the children started at Tom's dirty black figure. The girls began to cry, and the boys began to laugh, and all pointed at him rudely enough, but Tom was too tired to care for that. "What art thou, and what dost thou want?" cried the old dame. "A chimney-sweep? Away with thee! I'll have no sweeps here." "Water," said poor little Tom, quite faint. "Water? There's plenty at the beck," she said, quite sharply. "But I can't get there. I'm most clemmed with hunger and drought." And Tom sank down on the doorstep, and laid his head against the post. And the old dame looked at him through her spectacles 1 minute, and 2, and 3, and then she said, "He's sick, and a bairn's a bairn, sweep or none." "Water," said Tom. "God forgive me." And she put by her spectacles, and rose, and came to Tom. "Water's bad for thee. I'll give thee milk." And she toddled off into the next room, and brought a cup of milk and a bit of bread. Tom drank the milk off at 1 draught, and then looked up, revived. "Where didst come from?" said the dame. "Over fell, there," said Tom, and pointed up into the sky. "Over Harthover, and down Lewthwaite Crag? Art sure thou art not lying?" "Why should I?" said Tom, and leant his head against the post. "And how got ye up there?" "I came over from the place." And Tom was so tired and desperate he had no heart or time to think of a story, so he told all the truth in a few words. "Bless thy little heart! And thou hast not been stealing, then?" "No." "Bless thy little heart, and I'll warrant not. Why, God's guided the bairn because he was innocent, away from the place, and over Harthover fell, and down Lewthwaite Crag. Who ever heard the like, if God hadn't led him? Why dost not eat thy bread?" "I can't." "It's good enough, for I made it myself." "I can't," said Tom, and he laid his head on his knees, and then asked, "Is it Sunday?" "No, then, why should it be?" "Because I hear the church bells ringing so." "Bless thy pretty heart! The bairn's sick. Come wi' me, and I'll hap thee up somewhere. If thou wert a bit cleaner, I'd put thee in my own bed for the Lord's sake. But come along here." But when Tom tried to get up, he was so tired and giddy that she had to help him and lead him. She put him in an outhouse, upon soft sweet hay and an old rug, and bade him sleep off his walk, and she would come to him when school was over, in an hour's time. And so she went in again, expecting Tom to fall fast asleep at once. But Tom did not fall asleep. Instead of it, he turned and tossed and kicked about in the strangest way, and felt so hot all over that he longed to get into the river and cool himself. And then he fell half asleep, and dreamt that he heard the little white lady crying to him, "Oh, you're so dirty! Go and be washed!" And then that he heard the Irishwoman saying, "Those that wish to be clean, clean they will be." And then he heard the church bells ring so loud, close to him too, that he was sure it must be Sunday, in spite of what the old dame had said. And he would go to church, and see what a church was like inside, for he had never been in one, poor little fellow, in all his life. But the people would never let him come in, all over soot and dirt like that. He must go to the river and wash first. And he said out loud again and again, though being half asleep he did not know it, "I must be clean, I must be clean." And all of a sudden he found himself, not in the outhouse on the hay, but in the middle of a meadow, over the road, with the stream just before him, saying continually, "I must be clean, I must be clean." He had got there on his own legs, between sleep and awake, as children will often get out of bed and go about the room when they are not quite well. But he was not a bit surprised, and went on to the bank of the brook, and lay down on the grass, and looked into the clear, clear limestone water, with every pebble at the bottom bright and clean, while a little silver trout dashed about in fright at the sight of his black face. And he dipped his hand in, and found it so cool, 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 and he said, "I will be a fish, I will swim in the water, I must be clean, I must be clean." So he pulled off all his clothes in such haste that he tore some of them, which was easy enough with such ragged old things. And he put his poor hot sore feet into the water, and then his legs, and the farther he went in, the more the church bells rang in his head. "Ah," said Tom, I must be quick and wash myself. The bells are ringing quite loud now, and they will stop soon, and then the door will be shut, and I shall never be able to get in at all." Tom was mistaken, for in England the church doors are left open all service time, for everybody who likes to come in. Churchman or dissenter, aye, even if he were a Turk or a heathen, and if any man dared turn him out, as long as he behaved quietly, the good old English law would punish that man as he deserved for ordering any peaceable person out of God's house, which belongs to all alike. But Tom did not know that, any more than he knew a great deal more which people ought to know. And all the while he never saw the Irishwoman, not behind him this time, but before, for just before he came to the riverside she had stepped down into the cool clear water, and her shawl and her petticoat floated off her, and the green water weeds floated round her sides, and the white water lilies floated round her head, and the fairies of the stream came up from the bottom and bore her away and down upon their arms, for she was the queen of them all, and perhaps of more besides. "Where have you been?" they asked her. "I have been smoothing sick folks' pillows, and whispering sweet dreams into their ears, opening cottage casements to let out the stifling air, coaxing little children away from gutters and foul pools where fever breeds, turning women from the gin-shop door, and staying men's hands as they were going to strike their wives, doing all I can to help those who will not help themselves, and little enough that is, and weary work for me. But I have brought you a new little brother, and watched him safe all the way here." Then the fairies laughed for joy at the thought that they had a little brother coming. "But mind, maidens, he must not see you or know that you are here. He is but a savage now, and like the beasts which perish, and from the beasts which perish he must learn. So you must not play with him, or speak to him, or let him see you, but only keep him from being harmed." Then the fairies were sad, because they could not play with their new brother, but they always did what they were told. And their queen floated away down the river, and whither she went, thither she came. But all this Tom, of course, never saw or heard, and perhaps if he had it would have made little difference in the story, for he was so hot and thirsty, and longed so to be clean for once, that he tumbled himself as quick as he could into the clear cool stream. And he had not been in it 2 minutes before he fell fast asleep, into the quietest, sunniest, cosiest sleep that ever he had had in his life, and he dreamt about the green meadows by which he had walked that morning, and the tall elm trees, and the sleeping cows, and after that he dreamt of nothing at all. The reason of his falling into such a delightful sleep is very simple, and yet hardly any one has found it out. It was merely that the fairies took him. Some people think there are no fairies. Cousin Cramchild tells little folks so in his Conversations. Well, perhaps there are none in Boston, U.S., where he was raised. There are only a lot of clumsy spirits there, who can't make people hear without thumping on the table. But they get their living thereby, and I suppose that is all they want. And Aunt Agitate, in her Arguments on Political Economy, says there are none. Well, perhaps there are none in her Political Economy. But it is a wide world, my little man, and thank heaven for it, for else, between crinolines and theories, some of us would get squashed. And plenty of room in it for fairies without people seeing them, unless, of course, they look in the right place. The most wonderful and the strongest things in the world, you know, are just the things which no one can see. There is life in you, and it is the life in you which makes you grow and move and think, and yet you can't see it. And there is steam in a steam engine, and that is what makes it move, and yet you can't see it. And so there may be fairies in the world, and they may be just what makes the world go round, to the old tune of C'est l'amour, l'amour, l'amour qui fait le monde ronde. And yet no one may be able to see them, except those whose hearts are going round to that same tune. At all events, we will make believe that there are fairies in the world. It will not be the last time by many a one that we shall have to make believe. And yet, after all, there is no need for that. There must be fairies, for this is a fairy tale. And how can one have a fairy tale if there are no fairies? You don't see the logic of that. Perhaps not. Then please not to see the logic of a great many arguments exactly like it, which you will hear before your beard is grey. End of Chapter 2, Part 1.